Hey, Sally, thank you for coming in. Just a marvelous background. Of course, we've done a prior interview. This is prior to your first best-selling book, that's sort of taken the world by storm, the Startup Protocol. You got a new one coming out shortly called the Unicorn Protocol, which is really focused on the narratives of different people who have actually achieved it. And really great guidance in that book. Really recommended for everybody. No, in fact, it doesn't matter who you are. It could be you could be a CEO of a Fortune company. You're going to pick up tips from reading the book. So Sally, again, you have this background in marketing and fashion and computing science, and then you got these, masters in systems management, and of course an MBA, and then early career in the defense sector and NATO and social services stuff, and then refugee settlement, and then again a doubling down on entrepreneurship and strategic marketing roles with startups and things like that, including vice president of marketing, and then founded and ran two startup companies, and then you got your Microsoft IoT role. IoT being Internet of Things, and leveraging IoT to improve patient outcomes and operational efficiencies, and then leading up to so kind of your major pinnacle role here as a global lead of health and life sciences, Microsoft for startups, and you're integrated with the Pegasus companies. And when I do keynotes, or what I call AMA, Ask Me Anything, I say you gotta follow Sally Ann Frank on LinkedIn and all the social media, because she posts every day a lot on innovation, and you give lots of great tips. And every time you post, you're pointing to a useful resource too. So I mean, that's why I'm recommending that. You're like Microsoft's GPT out there. You're the co-pilot for, I guess I should use the term GPT, but more like the co-pilot, Microsoft for Startups co-pilot. You're out there and you're just producing so much useful and meaningful content and just a marvelous background. So again, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me, and that's a tremendous introduction and probably not quite not quite deserved, but I appreciate it.
Well, you're clearly brilliant. You're, really, really hardworking, and you're able to manage so many different kind of dimensions, and that's because of all the remarkable gifts you have. And then you bring them all to bear to make sure that your startups are engaged and people understand who they are, and effectively you're doing global development, business development for the startups that are Microsoft for startups. So. Since we talked last time, I guess it's been over a year. Can you describe what's happened to Microsoft for Startups? Has it grown? What does it look like? So, when I first engaged with you and with Microsoft for Startups, there's like 20,000 startups. Is it bigger than that now? When you come inside the program, has it changed? Is the interaction changed? Is the ecosystem, how is it different? How is it modified? And so there's a whole bunch of questions about, I'm a startup, what do I do? And things like that. So if you can give us a kind of a snapshot
Sure.
again of Microsoft for Startups, how it's evolved and things like that.
Sure. So thank you, Stephen, for inviting me to chat with you today. It's always a pleasure to see you and be with you. Microsoft for Startups has evolved. As of July of 2025, we decided that after getting a lot of feedback from particularly early stage companies, we decided that we needed a faster on-ramp for them. So we've actually split the startup on-ramping into two focus areas. So the first one is for super early stage. So you're ideating, you're building that MVP. And that, if you go to startups.microsoft.com, there's actually a tile on the right. And that's where you would go if you're still kind of figuring things out. And the reason why we changed it is because we were asking early stage, like ideation type of startups, to go through this very long process to get into the program. So now it's like three or four questions. You provide answers to those questions, and you're automatically in Microsoft for Startups with up to 5K worth of Azure credits. And then if you go back to startups.microsoft.com, on the left side is another tile where those organizations that are working with our investors, accelerators that are more advanced and can take advantage of some of the later stage types of tools that we have. That's on the left side. So we've really tried to continue the process of meeting founders where they are and providing them with access requisite to where they are in their journey. Now, you mentioned the Pegasus program, and that is the part of the program where we select high potential startups that we do deep go-to-market and deep technical engagement. That has not changed. That is very much the same as it has been for the last few years, where those folks are given a technical resource and a go-to-market resource to work with them. The final change that I'll mention is that in that left-hand side, where we're talking and working with startups that have investors and have been through accelerators or are doing that now, we are also starting to build go-to-market strategies at scale for them. So you have, just to recap, you have super early stage, then you have investor that gets technical support. Then you have the those that are affiliated with an investor or an accelerator. They get technical support and go-to-market support at scale, so essentially giving them tools. And then the Pegasus portfolio is that concierge level engagement where we're doing both the technical work and bespoke go-to-market.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a complete sort of ecosystem, almost like a venture studio in essence, right? Because you're able to give some hand holding and I know there used to be a pretty active mentor program. Is that still there, or how's that working?
That has been deprecated, primarily because the revamp that we did, we felt was more aligned to what we needed to accomplish with our startups.
So then if they need any kind of support, like mentorship report support and things like that, they can get that internally within the Microsoft for Startups platform. Then they can reach out and say, "Hey, I need some help here or there." Or how does that work?
Yeah, so the technical support is always there, and then those that are in the investor side will get some additional go-to-market mentoring. Correct.
Right. And then on the investor side, are you taking in any new investors in the short term, or it's a closed system, I believe, right now, right?
It is because this program is new, we want to make sure we're getting it right. So we've done a bit of triage on the ones that we feel are most important to the ecosystem across all of our priority industries, which are uh, obviously health and life sciences, retail and CPG, AI, cybersecurity, and financial services. And then once we get that right, we'll be focusing into other areas as well.
Yeah, so in the closed sort of, it's an invite only investor network. Can you talk about what some of the capabilities those investors have in working with their startups and or is that sort of private? You know, because I know there's kind of like the special bonus programs for investors that can be quite useful, and for startups for that matter that they've invested in.
Yeah, so the reason why we've kind of closed it is, just to get our bearings and all of that. And then each of the industry, so and the ones that we started with were kind of a cross segment. So they weren't specialized into any of our priority industries. Since we launched in July, we've now infused that investor list from from investors and accelerators that are more industry specific aligned with those five. And we'll continue to do that, but we're doing it in kind of in chunks. So we bring on a set, we make them make sure that they're properly integrated into the program and all of that, and then we'll go the next step. So it won't be closed forever. The way we're doing it now is that you can't just sign up. We're trying to be a bit more strategic, looking at where our startups are coming from and who their investors are, so that we can continue to deepen the relationships with them. And then we'll be opening it up. I don't know exactly when, but eventually. Yeah. But we're
Yeah, I
still
mean,
infusing the network with more investors and accelerators.
I mean, I probably have 2,000 investors that'd be interested in getting on
Yes.
board. Every time I
Well,
do it, go ahead.
yeah, the other thing is if there are investors out there that want to suggest a startup to our team, we have the ability to bring in startups that are not aligned with a specific investor in the program. We can do a little bit of due diligence and make those recommendations. So, for example, if you had some that you've invested in and you're not in our investor network, you just let me know who they are, and we'll take a look and we can bring them in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting program, and I say in every keynote, and in fact every day, basically, that it's the best system out there, and very innovation focused. Is the reason that Microsoft has Microsoft for Startups because they realize just how valuable the innovation system is. And there must be some stats where, how much innovation comes from public sector and national laboratories and universities and translational research, and how much actually just comes from, like entrepreneurs who just say, hey, I'm going to do a startup, and they figure out, product market fit and things like that. And they start scaling versus, big hyperscalers like Microsoft who have their own R&D and like Peter Lee is the head of R&D, and of course he also has a mandate to do, translate some of that R&D into something that Microsoft can use. So, do you have some sense of what percentage of innovation actually comes from startups? Because it looks like Microsoft's really thinking this is an important part of what they're doing, right?
Yes, and I appreciate you bringing this up because for decades, Microsoft for Startups was primarily an area where we would help with technical support and it was all self-serve and it was pretty much a kind of a one size fits all. And over the last 5 or so years, we've really worked to make it much more beneficial both for the startups and frankly for Microsoft. So the way we work with our startups that are probably somewhat unique is that we often will use our startups to work with our research and development teams, our product engineering teams, because they can be the tip of the spear and give us feedback on features, functions, how this integrates with other systems, and all of that. For example, when we launched Dragon Copilot, in October, which is our ambient listening workflow tool in healthcare, specifically for providers, where they're listening to patients and doing the notes and then sending off workflows to facilitate the next step in the patient journey. We actually had 5 startups as part of that launch that had come in early to do some testing, work with our product teams, test out the partner extensions that we built. And that is yet another way that we like to work with our startups because they become that early adopter, if you will, because that benefits them and it benefits us. So there are a variety of other levers that we can pull, like working with product engineering, working with R&D, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone gets that opportunity. It's those are very much bespoke kind of engagements, and we structure them in a way that protects everybody's IP. At our heart, Microsoft is a productivity and platforms company, and we rely on our partners to deliver that last mile. So as we build these new tools, like we built Microsoft Discovery for accelerating research and development in life sciences and chemicals and all of that, we look for early stage companies and enterprises to give us feedback and to help us launch those products so that when they come to market, they are hitting the mark as to what they should be doing and providing the value that they should.
Yeah, I mean it's a really interesting pro. I'm actually in your investor network, and one of the feedback I gave is because I sit across the Southern California Master Fund. We're a CEO-led fund, so that's like a separate fund. I
Yes.
have Reds Capital. I have this new kind of stealth one that you're aware of with Dr. Stephen Cheyenne, and then I'm involved in a sovereign funding. I'm embedded, and we're deploying billions, right? And we go early as well. We go early, we go direct, we go fund of funds, we go direct to venture capital, and we do everything on these. And then we work with other countries. So, and then I'm in translational research. So, for example, IEEE entrepreneurship program where we have
Mhm.
investors
Yeah.
and we have startups and things like that. So, one of the feedback I was providing to your group was I've got capability I can bring to people I invest in, but it's tied to one fund. Because I'm involved in like a dozen funds, I was asking them if they could tie it to me as a person, because then I can deliver that value depending on the pocket I'm in, right?
Right.
Because I'm making investments basically across many platforms, right? So
Right. Right.
So I don't
Yeah.
I don't know if that's possible or is that a consideration for you guys internally or for you people internally?
I actually don't know because that's not my area. We have a whole team, as you can imagine, that manages our investor and accelerator network. And so I work with them obviously to make recommendations and everything, but they run their own program. So I'm not gonna weigh in on that. But I'll definitely mention it to them next time I talk to them.
Yeah, in fact, almost all of my friends are the same, right? We do direct investments and then we have funds and we're embedded in a
Yeah.
lot of different things, right? And so we see a lot.
Right. I'm
So
sure you do.
yeah. So where do you see this program evolving then? How would you like to see it evolve, this program and the onboarding process? Maybe you can kind of just remind the audience because it's really simple, right?
It is
It's
super simple. Yeah, it's for those that don't have an investor, it's a very short form. You basically tell us who you are and what you want to build. On the investor accelerator side, it's a slightly longer process, but it's really very streamlined. You end up with an investor code or an accelerator code. You put that code in. It's a very quick form, and then you're in the program and get up to. It's possible to get up to 350K worth of cloud credits. And as we continue to evolve, some of the things that we're looking at is like, scale go-to-market activities. We're looking for partner-to-partner opportunities. We're looking to really bridge the gap between these investor-funded startups and the broader Microsoft ecosystem. So it could be anything from helping them get connected with customers, helping them get connected with other Microsoft teams, to you know, supporting their go-to-market strategies and all of that. Our goal is to help them be successful. And the reason why is because when our partners are successful, Microsoft is successful. And we look to these innovators to really lead the ecosystems on what's happening next and how we can respond to the ever-changing world of AI.
There's I think I did an introduction to IEEE entrepreneurship, and I think there'd be a lot of benefits if there was some kind of direct relationship, right? Because they're so active, like they're running
Mhm.
programs globally. And anyways, I'll work on the inside
Okay.
to try to get more engagement. And of course, there's my friends within YPO and Tiger 21 and things
Right.
like that, where I do periodic introductions. And it's such a perfect fit for people like myself and my friends who are investors, right? I think it's such a great program that gee, I mean, I just want this thing to just continue to proliferate and grow like 10x. In my mind, it feels like it's grown 10x since last year. Like, from let's say January of last year to let's say it's almost 2 years now. We're going almost into 2026. Can you put sort of general numbers? Has it grown about 10x since January of 2024?
Yeah, I mean the program continues to grow. We don't really share actual numbers, but it has continued to grow, and I think more importantly, it has continued to be refined. We kind of pride ourselves at Microsoft for Startups as operating like a startup, looking for new opportunities to evolve, to respond to our customers, which in this case are our startups, as well as our enterprise customers, and making sure that we don't stand still, that we're not resting on our laurels, and that as the technology, as the demands of these priority industries continue to evolve, that we are not only keeping up, but hopefully leading the charge by supporting startups that are really innovating at the tip of the spear.
Yeah, and in fact, because you're now working with AI for good, it'd be great if that program would just say that's our go-to partner, any startups that are within the AI for good ecosystem, because they run those programs all the time, they
Right.
just automatically get recommended to go into Microsoft for Startups. Then there's a path, right? It's a process, and it'll definitely help mature the startups that go into that program and the ones that win and things like that. So hopefully you can make some kind of a dent there.
I will do my best.
So I like the way you're progressing. Let's talk about the success of your first book, because to me it's sort of a part of what you do in a big way, because startups need guidance, and you got all of that wonderful guidance in the startup protocol. And then for those startups who start to scale, and they want to know, hey, well, what does it take to become a unicorn? Then you got the unicorn protocol. Can you talk about that book, the original book, and sort of the ideas? Maybe share some of the hints in there, which you did in our past interview, but maybe kind of quickly overview it, and then overview your next book and why everybody out there, doesn't matter who you are, has to read it, right? So,
Thank you, Stephen. So the first book is really a kind of a how-to guide. So it goes through the steps of ideate, build, launch, and grow. And it really was born out of the process of meeting with startups over and over and over again and answering the same questions, or getting the same questions. And I was actually talking with a friend who's also an investor and said, I could write a book. And he's like, you should. And so I did. But the idea is that, very much there are people that have gone before you and there are best practices. So some of the things I talk about is that early on, especially in healthcare, you want to find people who want to go along with you on this journey. These are unpaid people. These are people who buy into your mission. And if you're a clinician, it might be a business person or an investor or somebody who understands what you're trying to solve and wants to help you along the way. Or if you're a technologist or a business person, it might be finding that clinical champion. And then moving from kind of that ID8, now you're building something. One of the key concepts that I talk about is proxy customers. So these are people who, yes, may not want to go along the entire journey with you, but are your ideal persona. Like when you have a solution, these are the people you want to sell to. If you bring them in early and have them give you feedback on what you're building, if you essentially make them a proxy for a later customer, then all of a sudden you've got people at the ground level giving you exactly what they need, whether it's how to integrate it into an existing system, how to integrate it into a workflow, how to make sure that it's part of the EMR, whatever it may be, they will give you that feedback. And the good thing about that is that if they give you feedback and they're actively engaged in what you're building, when you do have an MVP, they're going to be the first ones to adopt it and test it out. And so it's really all about making relationships that bring value to you and that you can bring value to them. The same thing goes with the VCs, and I don't have to tell you this. If you have an idea and you think it's going to take off, which most people do, as you're looking for those proxy customers, you also want to start scanning the ecosystem for potential investors, because the best time to build a relationship with an investor is when you don't need money.
That's true.
That's true, right? So you want to get them kind of softened up to your idea. You want to tell them what you're building. Get feedback from them as well, because they will know what what is in what solutions people are investing in, what they're investing in, and also provide guidance. And so those are some of the things that I think about and often are overlooked by early stage founders. The other thing that I recommend highly to any founder is to make sure that your product development roadmap, your regulatory pathway, and your go-to-market strategy are inextricably linked. They're like braided together. And the reason why is because I've seen a tremendous number of founders who have spent all their time on building this beautiful, elegant product. And then I ask, well, is it HIPAA compliant? Do you need FDA approval? Is this a 510(k)? And they go, I don't know. I haven't researched that yet. Okay, that's a problem. Who's your ideal persona? Who are you going to sell this to? Um, Patients? Like, I don't know. It's like, well, you should know that. And I've had a number of them say we're going to direct to consumer. And it is a lot harder to make millions and millions and millions of transaction versus doing a B2B to C where you're making tens or hundreds of transactions and they do the millions. And so, I don't know, maybe those are a few of the things that I really try to drive home.
Yeah, but it's very practically minded too, right? I mean, so you're trying to remove the friction by getting them to identify it early. And in fact, when you bring in relationships early, they become your supporters as well, right? Because I would say 90% of everything is relationships, right? So or more.
Absolutely. In this AI world, when it really comes down to things, it's the people. And actually everything we're building is for people.
And then you were very thoughtful in putting together this next book. So can you talk about the germination of that book and then kind of overview it and why everybody needs to read it and the value they'll get?
Yeah, and thank you for asking me about the book. So when I was completing the manuscript for the startup protocol, I realized that the story wasn't over. Like the book kind of gets you to the point where you're starting to grow, but what happens then? And so I decided to see if I could find 10 unicorn founders in healthcare and life sciences that would share their stories and use those stories as kind of, you know, business school case studies and what can we learn from those that have gone before you. And so the 10 companies, let's see if I can remember them all that are profiled. I hope they're most of them are household names. So it's ADOC, Amwell, Athena Health, Concert AI, Dispatch Health, which recently merged with Medically Home, Element Biosciences, Innovacer, Lunit out of South Korea, Omada Health, which just went IPO, and Redox. And all of them have very unique stories, but there are some really interesting threads that go through that are common to all of them, like mission focus. I cannot tell you how strongly these people focused on the mission. And in almost every case, they said, we were mission focused, we tried to solve this problem, and we let everything else take care of itself. So think in terms of if you're focused on the mission, people will flock to you. If you are focused on the mission and you go to a VC and they see how focused you are and they see that the progress that you've made, they'll join. So it was all about the mission. That was one of the really overarching themes. I think the other thing that came up quite a few times is the predisposition for a founder with all their bravado and gravitas saying, if we build it, they will come. Doesn't happen. And even some of these unicorn founders had that experience where it's like, it's a no-brainer. It's cheaper, it's faster. Like it has all these things that people need, but yet people still don't come because you have to educate the market. And that's why you go to market strategy is so important. And then the final thing I'll say, and this is a bit of a tease, if nothing else, you have to read it for the early business models that these unicorns came up with. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but several of them came up with the wildest ways to make money early to enable them to build the longer term product. Everything from selling the documentation to what they were building, which is what Redox did, to Concert AI selling options on future product features. Like, here's we haven't built it yet, but we're going to give you this really good price early on, and you'll go on the journey with us. And like, who comes up with those things? Those are really innovative ways to build your company and are not standard practice. And I think when we think about innovators, we often think about, oh, they're looking at an innovative way to solve a problem. But frankly, in reading this, you'll realize that their innovative mind doesn't just go to solving the problem that they're building their solution for, but their innovative mind also translates to all the other facets of building their company. And I think that's what's really interesting.
Right, they're very solution focused, no matter what the domain is, right? It
Right.
just and really, like you said, the mission ultimately success driven to whatever their mission is, right? So, and they don't treat any kind of challenge as a challenge, as a problem. They treat it as some opportunity to learn and overcome and master. And then, of course, then they got that whole segment addressed or something like that.
Right.
So now your book is going to be released in December now, right? It's a little bit ahead.
Yeah, it's on, both books are on Amazon, of course, and you can pre-order the Unicorn Protocol, and I think it's going to be released later this month. We're doing two launch events. One is going to be at CES in January in Vegas, and then back to Vegas in March, where we'll do another launch event in HIMSS.
You know, it's interesting. I got a request to maybe do a talk at CES. I haven't said yes, and I've had a few invites for WEF, but I declined. I'm just so busy.
Yes.
But definitely, I'll recommend you. You know, so you can get your story out. Okay, so we see in your journey with Microsoft for Startups, it's growing. It's becoming much more mature in terms of all the value ways that it can help startups and together with investors, right? Because it's such a disciplined environment in term both from the startup standpoint, Microsoft's ecosystem that they've attached to it, and then a support for both the investor and also for the startup. So that's comforting as a result, because it's actually great for the global ecosystem as well, right? So
Yes, I hope so.
does Microsoft for startups then, because I'm plugged into some sovereign funding, but there is there any kind of programmatic approach to approach some of these sovereign funding programs and say, hey, we're out here, and why don't you partner with us as well, or things like that?
Well, can you restate, you cut out for just a second for me?
Oh, okay. So every major country in the world, especially the Western countries, they actually have a formal sovereign funding program. And I'll describe the one in Canada just to give you an idea. Um, and we're transparent. So there's things I can't talk about. It's under NDA, but because they publish this, then I can talk about it. So what they do is the government allocates funding, and then they publish what the funding is for. And typically, the funding up to this point has been we want to invest in the VC ecosystem or the fund manager ecosystem. That could be fund of fund managers. So, fund of
Hmm.
fund managers are managers who have funds, but their funds invest in VCs. Those are called fund of fund managers. And then they have programs for fund managers who are VCs, right? And then they have all sorts of other kinds of programs for direct investment and support programs and fellowship programs and things like that.
Right.
So typically, what they do, and this will be true of all the countries, right? That they have some kind of funding, they want to deploy that funding, they'll have some kind of matching program. In other words, if we fund a fund manager or venture capital, a fund manager, we'll provide some funding, but they have to match it with a plus two times or something, right?
Hmm.
They have to get so it's a public-private kind of partnership. But
Right.
if we put in some funding, it's easier for them to get funding as well, right? Because we're big and we're government, right? And we're pretty sophisticated in how we fund. Every time I do these things, I think, gee, Microsoft is so perfect to be integrated into these programs, right? Because you have an onboarding process, you have this immediate sort of value system, you have a scale system internally as the startup progresses, they can enter into more richer programs. They can get inductions into different kind of marketplaces. Microsoft runs lots of events, and as they progress, sometimes they'll get invitations to do those events. Adds a lot of credence because they're in these programs. Everybody uses cloud. You get cloud credits. I mean, if you get it once startups are in the program, they can get access to early looks at what Microsoft has under the hood as well, right? So that's a big advantage, right? And so it's like a no-brainer for startups. And I'm always thinking from a sovereign fund standpoint,
Hmm.
it's kind of a no-brainer for governments to partner in some way, right? So,
Yeah, it's a really interesting point and something that we should probably look into. And frankly, that would be another part of our team, and maybe they already are looking at that. So I'll definitely follow up with them because it's an interesting idea that it has a lot of merit to it.
yeah, the same thing. Yesterday, I'm a founder of the World Food Program Advisory Council, and we have an innovation accelerator. It's actually the largest in the UN system.
Hmm.
And we allocate the most capital. We have
Wow.
the most mature program. And so that's just in the UN system. But from a humanitarian accelerator program, we're the largest in the
Wow.
world. Right?
Tremendous.
And yeah, and we have partners. We partner with governments and accelerators and things like that. And Google is a partner. So I've been suggesting to them that
Subtle hint there.
Microsoft needs to be a partner because the program, your program, because I'm so familiar with all the great work you do that.
Yes.
So
Yeah, we'll have to
and
follow up
and
on that.
yeah, and it's such a and because we deploy so much capital, like and a lot of it's grants. So we are an
Right.
accelerator. We provide funding, but a lot of it's grants.
Yes, and
So
non-dilutive, which is super helpful.
yeah, and we have boot camps to accelerate. We have partner programs to help accelerate, and we work with all sorts of foundations and governments and things like that, plus directly with investors. But because of the way Microsoft is structured, it would be a perfect fit,
Yeah,
in
I
my
agree.
opinion, better than even Google. So, um, anyways, I've done. I'm pretty sure I've done an introduction, though, right? To
I'm sorry?
you. I've done an introduction to you, haven't you?
I thought so.
Yeah, to the Bernard Kowatsch, who heads up the program, and
Yeah,
anyway,
I've been on the road, so it may be
yeah,
I have to get back into it.
it'd be a while back, but he's been promoted, and now he runs all of venture
Hmm.
for the World Food Program.
Wow.
It's the world's largest UN agency. Our budget is somewhere to 8 to 12 billion a year.
Wow.
We run the largest logistics program. We have the most staff, about 22,000. As I mentioned, we run the largest innovation acceleration program, period, just humanitarian.
Wow.
And we invest in things like climate, logistics, healthcare. So definitely tie in with your mandate. Anyways, I'm always happy to talk about it with anybody because I think it's such a great program, but especially with you because you're such a power dynamo in your Microsoft for startups. Is there anything we missed? So we talked about, I kind of introduced you, just a little quick summary of all the great things you've done. We talked about Microsoft for Startups, how it's evolved. We talked about the different programs out there, the fact they kind of bifurcated it so that if you're
Hmm.
kind of new, if there's an entry onboarding program, if you're a little more mature, it's just a different sort of program. Once you're in it, we discussed all the different ways that Microsoft can integrate with you. We talked about the value reverse book. If you're new and you're looking for a lot of pointers, things like that from somebody who's done it, and but then also leads like the world's biggest program. And then you on your unicorn book, Unicorn Protocol, you discuss people who made it, and then some great pointers of what that journey is like. And there'll be things about volatility and stuff too. You have to be persistent and you don't give up. And you mentioned being very mission driven. So, it's really great tips. Because you work daily with all of these startups on a regular basis, are there additional tips that you want to give to potential startups up there, whether they're like part of my audience are researchers, and some of these researchers are actually exiting research, and they're getting like $3 billion with no revenue, right? And I know them.
Yes,
So
yes, that's
so
amazing.
yeah, and I see more of them going, gee, maybe I should wear an entrepreneur hat because to get all this funding.
Right.
And then you see some of the changes in the marketplace, right? Are we reaching an end to scaling and, like pre-scaling and scaling and inference scaling, and or do we need new models? I don't know if you want to go there or not, but so first of all, any other tips? Because uh, founders come from all different environments, right? So
Right. The thing that I think about is that successful founders understand their strengths and their weaknesses. And I will tell you, there have been a number of founders that I've worked with that were clinicians, that the moment that they thought they had something, they found a business leader to work with. Because they wanted to remain that visionary. They wanted to focus on the value and building something, and they wanted somebody else to take care of the actual mechanics of the business. And I think that's really smart, and I encourage people to understand what they're good at, and to surround themselves with people who complement them. The other thing I also, and this kind of goes along with the same vein, is that be coachable. Like there are a lot of people that know things, that have experiences that they can bring to you. And I don't mean listen to everybody, and I don't mean, kind of go willy-nilly through your journey. But there are times that there are blind spots, and frankly, that's in the title of the first book, where you just don't know what you don't know. And so making sure that when someone comes up with a good idea, that you fully digest that and determine whether or not it's the right idea for you, but be coachable. I've had, whether it's kind of building that product development roadmap, or it's how you deal with prospective investors and customers and other stakeholders, it's good to be mission focused with also the ability to balance new ideas, new strategies, so that you can really become as successful as possible.
yeah, I mean that's really really good advice. There's a program within Microsoft called Imagine Cup, and I've been judging it for like 20 years.
Yeah, it's great.
It, it the winners within that program, and the sort of the regional winners, some of them would be perfect for Microsoft for startups, but they're not aware of Microsoft for startups. Have you ever thought of co-branding somehow or working
We're
with
we're
that?
we're in, yeah, yes, we're working on that as we speak. Um, Yes. So I can't say more, but yes, as a matter of fact, there was just an email chain this week about finding pathways between the two. So yeah, I can't say more, but yes, it's a great idea.
There's another program called the International Science and Engineering Fair where I judged, and I would say all of because those are the winners of the science fairs in all the different countries.
Right.
And the judging criteria just to even get to the world final, it has to be
Yeah.
novel. And in
Wow.
fact, as a judge who's judged, you look for
Yeah.
that. It has to be not. They wouldn't even make it to the finals, the world finals. So, have you considered maybe just offering, saying, "Hey, we'd love to be aware we have this ecosystem called Microsoft for Startups," and I would say everybody who's at the finals would qualify for sure because they've already been vetted that it. So part
Right.
of the judging is can it be commercializable? Part
Right.
of the judging is it has to be unique. Otherwise, they won't make it to the final. It has to be novel.
Hmm.
It has to be useful and things like that. Uh,
Very cool.
uh,
Yeah,
have you?
that would be interesting. Yeah, I wasn't aware of that. So, and of course, I lead just one of our priority verticals. So, yeah, it'd be really interesting to learn more for sure.
Okay, and they have a whole health and life sciences portion.
Yay. I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and anyways, I'm thinking of going back and offering prizes and things like that, and could act as a bit of a feeder. But it'd be better if Microsoft was directly represented. That's the only reason I bring it up.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to learn more about it.
Yeah, and then of course there's so many of these other programs within ACM and IEEE, right? Because between the two of us, we will have over 2,500 conferences, and there's translational pieces to a lot of these now. Where
Hmm.
is there something novel, and then you get an award for it or things like that. Does Microsoft for Startups then, because you're integrated into the program, uh, you're probably stretched for time. Are you looking for those kinds of partnerships? In other words, this out there, people are going to think, "Gee, that's a great program. We run this program somewhere." Uh,
Hmm.
can they engage and do some kind of partnership with Microsoft for Startups? They wouldn't looking for money or anything, but just
Right.
it gives an off ramp for the things they do that they can feed into your program, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, we have a team dedicated to partnerships, so it's just a question of getting the information over to that team for them to evaluate it.
Okay.
That's all they do is partnerships because it's that important.
Do they have a place on the website where we can make submissions for partnerships? Or
I don't think so, but um, you can share them with me and I'll forward them.
well, okay. So this is kind of live. So IEEE Entrepreneurship. We have a formal program. We run programs all the time. We bring investors and startups together. I definitely would be some advantage in working together.
Yeah,
We're in the early stages of the one with ACM, so I'm embedded in both. There's
great.
another program called WITSA, the World Innovation Technology Services Alliance. We represent over 90% of the tech industry at the leadership level, like CX level.
Nice.
And 2 years ago, we started a World Cup, and I've been judging it. In fact, our next World Cup is next year, and we had 19 finalists in 2024, and it's a very sophisticated judging process, and they would be perfect for Microsoft for
Mhm.
startups. In fact, they would qualify for your Pegasus program, and very because it's for scaling startups, very mature, right?
I
So,
see. Great.
and they're
Love
and they're
that.
big, yeah, they're big cloud users, so it would fit perfectly. Um, I mean, there's future poor youth. I mean, there's probably 100
So
of
many. Yeah.
yeah, that would be perfect for. Okay, we're in our last few minutes. Is there any recommendations that you'd want to give to the audience or questions you want to leave the audience?
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that I think about a lot, especially in healthcare and life sciences, is we have a lot of work to do. We have access problems in healthcare. We have equity problems. We have staffing issues. We have high costs. I mean, there's so much to be done specifically in healthcare and life sciences, which is where I live, that my my rallying call is if you've got an idea, please pursue it because it's never going to be one company, one innovation that's going to solve this. We all actually need to work together to fix our healthcare and life sciences kind of not the companies themselves, but the way we deliver. And so, whether you're talking about dealing with a rare disease or you're talking about making sure that somebody is aging in place in Montana gets the support they need, or there's access to maternal care in India. All of those things need to be solved for because we're not doing a good job at it. We have people who are undernourished, live in food deserts, live in care deserts. So bring your passions to the ecosystem, ask for help. We're all in this together, and we'll do more working together than trying to, build fiefdoms and try and carve out our little niche to solve a specific problem. It's all interrelated. We're all interrelated, and we need to work together. So go out there and help us fix it.
Yeah, go out there and help us fix it. And also look at Sally Ann Frank online and follow her in LinkedIn and X and Instagram or all Facebook or
I'm
wherever.
just on LinkedIn. I'm just on
Okay.
LinkedIn.
Okay, so make sure Sally Ann Frank, you got to follow her because she posts every day and it's great content. To the audience, make sure you investigate Microsoft for startups and
Startups.microsoft.com.
yeah, take a look, right? And start playing with it and recommend it to your colleagues in your ecosystem. It's such a great system. Also, look at Sally's first book. It's an amazing book. It's a highly recommended book. And in fact, every startup program in the world should use that as their base, their Bible.
Thank you.
And then she's got her new one called the Unicorn Protocol, and you need to look at it because there's just so much great advice in there and stories and narratives that will guide anybody who's entrepreneurial. And that could be an innovation center within an existing enterprise company. So it really applies to anybody,
Yes,
including executives.
and I appreciate you writing the forward to it. It's very kind of you.
So everybody, Sally is the person that you want to sort of coalesce around and follow. So thank you, Sally, for coming in and sharing all of your wisdom with our audience.
Stephen, thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm really appreciative of all the support you give to the program, our startups, and me personally. So thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.